Thank you very much to all the people who signed up to the 5th of our series of shared parenting webinars. Our international tour has reached the USA today. Subsequent sessions will look at developments in Israel and Spain, although that may not be until next year. We're very grateful to the Scottish law firm Harper Macleod, who sponsored this series. All the sessions will be recorded and made available on our website, along with links to background information, and we will inform people when the film and the PowerPoints and the transcripts are made available. There's a sort of jingling noise. Where's that coming from? I don't know. It stopped. Now that I've commented on it, it stopped. Never mind. All this at Shared Parenting Scotland, we're doing two main things. Our helpline, our local group meetings, website, publications, WhatsApp groups, and training programs are all intended to support the many separated fathers, mothers, and other family members who contact us. Our other objective is to campaign for better support for separated parents and their children, to help them deal with the consequences of separation and keep both parents fully involved with their children. The Children's Scotland Act that was passed in 2020 and the Family Justice Modernisation Strategy, once they're actually implemented, will make some positive changes in Scotland. But we believe that a far more fundamental transformation is needed to take much of the dispute resolution out of the courts, to provide support for parents and for their children more quickly and less expensively, and above all, to put the interests and needs of children uppermost. That's why we're looking at this work in the USA today, to find out how they're using training to support parents. We can use the questions and discussion this afternoon to explore the possibilities. Our main speaker today is Bill Eddy from the High Conflict Institute, speaking to us from San Diego in California. Bill is the author of more than 20 books. He's a lawyer, a therapist, a mediator, and the co-founder and the Chief Innovation Officer of the High Conflict Institute. Chief Innovation Officer sounds like a really great title. Actually, I think you're very. It gives you a lot of freedom, but it also it just definitely it encapsulates the fact that a lot of the things that the High Conflict Institute is doing are coming from you and from your experience, and the fact that you've got experience across these different disciplines has obviously helped. Bill is an international expert on managing disputes involving high conflict personalities and personality disorders. Shared Parenting Scotland has been working in partnership with him and with the Institute for the last couple of years, and we're very happy to have him talking in today's webinar. So please use the Q&A, I see we've got one in there already, to post any questions, and we'll bring people in to actually talk once we've got to the discussion section of the meeting. So if I can hand over to you, Bill, now for you to share your screen and to start your presentation. And I was still getting that little jingling noise. I wonder where that's coming from.
I don't hear that, but thank you.
Oh, well, in that case, it's probably something that's happening to me and nobody else. That's great. Good. Okay, so Bill, if you want to share your slides and if you can get going, great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ian. Well, I'm pleased to speak to everyone and to be coming from San Diego, California. This is a method that I developed after about 12 years experience as a therapist, 15 years experience as a lawyer, and throughout that time I had been doing mediation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what led to the development of this approach and some of how it works. So first of all, in 2008, I co-founded High Conflict Institute with Megan Hunter. She worked with the court system in the next state over, Arizona, and she worked with their family law issues. So she got training for their judges. She worked on their child support guidelines, and many other aspects of family law from an administrative perspective. I had been working with clients at that point for 15 years as a family lawyer, and really integrating counseling ideas with legal cases in court and also in mediation. And one of the things that I noticed was that the people that often got stuck in what they called high conflict cases had issues that I recognized as a counselor. And I thought, well, let's see if counseling methods can help. And so I started looking at, first of all, how you calm people's emotions and not wanting to threaten and challenge people as much as explain things and soothe the situation. And I found in my mediations that that really helped people be more able to be creative and flexible if they were less anxious. So I was thinking about how to help people be less anxious. Also in 2007, I was asked by the family court judges of California to give a seminar at one of their conferences on personality disorders and what kind of counseling I recommended. And so I talked about personality disorders in terms of behavior tended to have all or nothing thinking, unmanaged emotions, some extreme behaviors, and preoccupation with the other person's behavior, blaming others. And so I said, if you're ordering counseling, you should have counseling that teaches people to calm themselves, to communicate in a more contained manner, rather than venting, etc. And that rather than just getting over the divorce, which is what the judges wanted the counseling to do, is to realize that there was a need for skills. And so I started thinking, what would the skills be? So we came up with the 4 big skills for life. So as the Chief Innovation Officer of High Conflict Institute, I've come up with all of these methods. So the 4 big skills for life are flexible thinking, because what we saw is people got stuck in all or nothing thinking, and managed emotions, because emotions took over. And some cases, and when I did trainings with judges, I would ask, how many of you have had somebody run out of the courtroom upset in the middle of their own hearing? And half the judges usually raise their hands. And so managing one's emotions, we realized, would be really helpful. I see that in mediation, where people get too agitated to think clearly, or sometimes they want to run out of the mediation room. So managing emotions, we saw, would be one of the big skills for life. Moderate behaviors. So often you see extremes. And in high conflict divorce and separation cases, you do see a fair amount of domestic violence, which is not the majority of people, but it's often a significant number that are in the court system, especially returning over and over for hearings. And lastly is to shift away from preoccupation with blaming others to checking yourself. So we developed these 4 big skills and started giving seminars on this. And later in 2008, I was giving a seminar on high conflict cases. And one of the therapists said, well, you know, you're saying this is what parents should learn in their counseling. And so you should write a manual for this, so we know what you're looking for. And I said, well, I thought therapists didn't want too much intervention in how they did therapy. And he said, well, yes and no, because we know that you know what you think would help, because I was a therapist who became a lawyer. And I did have a clear picture of what I hoped would happen. And so I wrote a a manual, basically. And at first we started thinking we'll call it New Ways Counseling. But my colleague, Megan Hunter, said, you know, a lot of men don't like the idea of counseling. So can we think of another name? So I thought about it for another month or so and said, how about New Ways for Families? Because it's for moms, it's for dads, and it's for the kids. So what we did is started calling it New Ways for Families and developed it first as a counseling method. So here's how the counseling method worked. And so we launched this in 2009 in San Diego. I developed a manual, I developed a parent workbook, and I had gone to law school with a woman who became the supervising family court judge in San Diego. And there's 21 family law judicial officers in San Diego County with a population of about 2 million. And so she said, okay, great, let's try it out. Let the judges try this, because I had really detailed how you can operate this. So the parents would have 6 individual sessions with a different counselor. So the parents would each have separate counselors, so we could seal them off from the litigation process. Then they would each have 3 parent-child sessions to teach the skills, to listen to the children, and to discuss changes in the family. So it was all guided by a parent workbook. Unfortunately, this costs a lot because good counselors charge a fair amount because they do good work. So we found we couldn't reach a lot of families this way. So in San Diego, the courts ordered maybe 30 families to take this. And we told them always order both parents. So there's no preference or discrimination or judgment involved. Both parents learn these skills, both parents teach them to the kids. And that way it's a whole family influence. And during those 6 individual parent sessions, we taught them how to manage their emotions, how to have flexible thinking, looking at decision making, because one of our goals was to help parents stay out of court and be able to make better decisions on their own, how to communicate essentially. So we got this started. In 2011, 2 court systems in Alberta, Canada, in Calgary and a little city called Medicine Hat, about 60,000 people, they both got grants for $500,000 to run New Ways for Families counseling for 3 years and to study it to some extent. So I went up there and trained them, and they then went on. Calgary didn't really study their program, so I don't have like numbers out of that. But Medicine Hat, the smaller city, 60,000 people, followed the method very consistently, had 103 parents go through it, and they found that 79% of those families, which I think is 81, something like that, were able to settle their case out of court after going through New Ways for Families counseling. And so, these were cases that had been in court an average of 3 times, court hearings, and 40% of them had been involved with the police and had restraining orders in their cases. So these were serious cases that the judges identified as high conflict, where learning the skills actually helped them stay out of court after that. So we were quite pleased with that. But again, that was a small number. And we were doing this in San Diego. We were doing this in Alberta, Canada. And I was starting to teach people here and there around the United States and Canada, and started into Australia. but we weren't reaching many people. And I was approached with the idea of doing an online class, which way back in the early 2010s was a horrifying idea. It's like, well, this is interpersonal skills. How can you teach interpersonal skills on a computer, you know? And so I was resistant and skeptical. And then I read a study that made a lot of sense to me. And the study said online learning can work if it's interactive, meaning people have activities to do, like writing. They have variety. They have pictures, text, video clips, etc. So putting all of this together, online learning can be equally as good as a parenting class. That online learning, self-directed, makes it easier for the person to use. Having it by online in the computer saves a whole lot of transportation time. And having taught classes, I know that only one person at a time can talk. And so if you're a student, you have to get a turn. You either fight for attention or wait for attention. And so when you're engaged is when you're thinking and you're putting your own thoughts down or into the discussion. Well, with online, everybody can be participating the whole time that they're engaged with the class. So an online pre-recorded class could really reach many, many more people, and this could be so much more inexpensive. So by 2015, we launched the online class, and one of the court jurisdictions that really was interested in this was in Orange County, just north of San Diego County. And they said, could I come up and give them a training, the judges and the court counselors, because they have court counselors that do brief mediations before people go into the courtroom. Throughout California, we have that. It's called Family Court Services. And so these are licensed mental health professionals who would do a mediation. And in half the counties, if they didn't reach an agreement, they'd also write a recommendation. So anyway, so they asked me to drive up, a couple hours drive from San Diego, to meet with them. So I did. And I explained the method, and that all the judges had to do was order the method. And then if people did come back, quiz them on something that they learned from the method before doing a regular court hearing. So they started ordering hundreds of parents. They've ordered over 3,000 parents to take our New Ways for Families online course. And the feedback we've gotten from the judges is that if the parents ever come back, and most of them don't, if they come back to court, their body language is less adversarial, that they're more relaxed, more willing to negotiate with each other. And the judges say, we can tell them, okay, go out in the hallway, see if you can settle this issue, then come back if you can't. And so people were really finding the skills useful. We got really high ratings in terms of satisfaction. 75% of the parents said that taking this online course, and this is just the online course, 75% said it improved their co-parenting relationship. 90% said it improved their parent-child relationship, even though the focus was on the co-parenting aspect of it. So that was great. And that, up by now we've had, I believe, over 5,000 parents worldwide have taken our class. But just felt like, that there's people that don't really get things resolved just by taking the online classes. There's some way to keep it inexpensive and have them have some person to talk to. And research on online learning starting to say a human element really does help. So coaching with an online class may be the best, kind of the sweet spot of cost efficiency and benefit to the learner. So in 2018, we added coaching with the online class, designed as 3 coaching sessions that go along with the online class. So let me go over the online class and the 12 classes. Roughly an hour each. You might spend time on these as a parent and progressing through. So you see the first class is coping with stress or managed emotions. That's one of the 4 big skills for life. The second is flexible thinking. Third is moderate behaviors. And the 4th is checking yourself. So the first 4 classes really establish these skills, and we have practice exercises, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But we also wanted people to apply the skills to different concerns in their co-parenting relationship. So looking at extreme behaviors and the effect on the children. And one thing the judges told us is they really wanted the parents to learn about the impact they have on the child's developing brain. That research is coming out about the brain, and so, you know, the impact on children of parents' anger, unpredictability, etc. So we started including video clips about that. Raising healthy children with your co-parent. Child developmental goals, just basic things and how they relate to a divorce and co-parenting. Parenting schedules, using professionals. There's so many different labels for professionals, you know, in a case. So you have guardian ad litems, you have lawyers, you have minors counsel for children, you have therapists, you have evaluators, you have all of this. And so just understanding resources of professionals and parent coaches. Talk about new partners, new families. 70% or more are going to end up remarrying after they get divorced or separated, or if not marrying, living together with a new family and a new partner. So navigating this using flexible thinking, managed emotions, moderate behaviors, and checking yourself would be very important. So you can see how they apply these basic skills in all these new situations. Handling financial issues, and last but not least, how to avoid becoming a high conflict case. Because we really do want to help people stay out of court and cooperate. It's so much better for the kids than having a judge make the decisions for the family. And the first people that will agree with that are judges. So we wanted the class to really help with that. So approximately an hour per session. So how do we coordinate the coaching with the online class? So after the first session, usually would be the first coaching session. And that would be focused on managing emotions and giving yourself encouraging statements. So that's the first coaching session, usually 50 minutes, roughly 50 to 60 minutes. The second would be after the 4th online class. So now they've got all 4 of the big skills, so they can practice making proposals, which is part of the flexible thinking. And they can practice BIF emails that are brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And so by practicing it with the coach can see where the client or coachee or learner, as you folks like to call them, to see where they could, you know, improve their skill, and also discuss with them how they can apply it to their situation. And also role play practice. let's pretend there's someone coming up this week that you're going to have a difficult conversation with. Let's talk about how you can give yourself an encouraging statement in that situation, and how you might make a proposal that might appeal to the other person that might work for you, and how you can present that, and then role play that. First, the coach may pretend to be the client, and the client pretends to be the person they're going to have a difficult conversation with. Then they switch roles, and now the client plays themselves, and the coach knows the words a potentially difficult person's going to say. And so say, well, you never come on time, or, you're not responsible with the children. And then how the person can give themselves encouraging statements and respond to that. So by doing role play practice, it really does bring in a sense of building confidence. And the feedback we get really worldwide is that parents really like these skills because they can use them anywhere. They can use them at work. A lot of them say, I use this with my boss. I got a raise, So these skills can really be helpful. Then the third session after the 12th online class to review and practice a little bit more. So these 3 sessions plus the online class seem to be kind of the balance, the ideal. Now, this is how we break down these 4 big skills, teaching specific techniques. So the making proposals technique, 3 steps. I'm not going to go into it. You can take the course if you're interested. Managed emotions, giving yourself encouraging statements, protecting the children from your upset emotions. Moderate behaviors. This is things like our BIF response emails that are brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And this technique, more than anything, has really caught on. And we estimate at least 1 million people now are using BIF communications, brief, informative, friendly, and firm, from our seminars, from our books, and from all of the coaching and classes people are providing. It really not only, I think, calms a written conversation or a verbal one, but it also slightly changes how you think about conflict with the other person. So this has really just been really helpful. And if you have 2 parents using BIF emails, such a calmer conversation and such good parenting and problem solving. And lastly, of course, is checking yourself. Am I using all of these skills? So real briefly, and then I'll be wrapping up. We give a 12-hour training for coaching with the online class, and we have trained about 10 coaches there or 12 coaches there. And it's just been so great. And we have a follow-up for coaches. We have a monthly Q&A for coaches from around the world with questions and discussion of how it goes, how each other is dealing with issues. So we provide this training about 3 times a year, but we've specifically trained your group in Scotland, and it's exciting to see you're starting to get results coming out, and it's very exciting to see that. So very briefly, we teach skills. That's the focus. We don't focus on problems. We focus on skills, which then the parents can use to solve their problems. And we'll discuss whatever problems, but look at how to apply the skills in solving that. And it's no blame, no shame. It's not about the person, it's about the skills. And learning and practice is the way to go. And overall, in many ways, it's designed really to save the children from a parent conflict. Because when parents aren't in conflict and they're on the same page, children can relax and be children rather than being the mediators for their parents' dispute, or feeling like they have to take sides, which so many children feel today. So I think that's my 25-minute presentation. And now I'll turn it back over and let me turn off my PowerPoint and be available for hearing your feedback and then any questions.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Bill. That was really interesting to hear the history of and the reasons why it developed in this way. And I mean, you were skeptical about online until you really entered into it. And I think a lot of other people are likely to start that way, although since COVID, so many people have been doing things online that I think it has smoothed the path a bit, not least in terms of people using the technology. We will come to the Q&A and discussion in a moment, but in the meantime, we have got Jackie Young. Now, Jackie has followed Bill's path in a way because I think you started off as a family lawyer and now you're a family therapist as well. So you've brought together these two professions and you're doing both of them at the moment, I think. So it must be a very challenging process. Jackie is one of the coaches who we have recruited and Bill has trained, and she's now doing coaching in our pilot of New Ways for Families in Scotland. We've now had nearly 50 parents have signed up as learners, and they are now progressing through. So our target was to have at least 50 in our pilot, which is being studied, but I'll say more about that later on. So let me hand over to Jackie to just give her response to Bill, and in particular, how has it worked for you in terms of, as a coach and as a professional who works with separating families a lot. So I'll hand over to Jackie.
Thank you, Ian. Yes, I think Bill and I were the opposite way around. I was a lawyer and became a family therapist because I didn't think court's the right place, and Bill did it the other way around. Started off as a counsellor and then became a lawyer, if I've got that right. So yeah, I think the two systems, we need the two systems, I think, the court system, therapeutic or counselling system, but certainly in Scotland and probably in North America, the two systems are familiar with each other, and I think sometimes just a bit nervous about each other. I think that's still the case in Scotland. But I did Bill's training, I think, first batch from Scotland, and we were provided with a manual. We have the regular Q&A sessions. Also, because of the pilot, coaches meet up quite regularly in Scotland, so we can quotes. That's how all of us. Recently, I was at one where it's just lawyers. So yeah, it's been a real learning experience for me as well. And as I listen to Bill, I think, oh, I could do better as a coach. I'm a lawyer, a media therapist, but I'm new to coaching, and I'm always thinking I could. I think that I always start with an extra session, as it were, because I always speak with it by phone first. I do that because I like to just hear their story. I also like to find out what their goal system. And I can hear that clanking as well. I don't know if it's me. Sure, but sorry if it's anyone else. Yeah, so I do that bit where I do hear from them at first, and then I do the 3 coaching sessions after that. So I quite like the goal setting bit of it, and I'm not sure whether I'm meant to do that or not, but I'm still nodding, so I'm liking that. But it's nice because that people have a tendency to want to go off in their narrative or ask about their next hearing or talk with blame and so on. So being able to bring them back to their goal can be quite useful, hopefully useful for them as well. I think it's interesting to hear about what people are doing around the world, and then just to compare and contrast what we're doing in Scotland. And I think I've noticed some differences in Scotland, and it may not be true of all coaches, but I think we're a wee bit more reserved than the North Americans maybe. I find sometimes when I'm working with the learners and asking them about encouraging statements and to think of something, that seems tricky. It doesn't come naturally to us, I don't think, nor indeed does role play. So I realise that I tend away from role play, and I do it in a different way. I use it maybe with a bit of mentalisation. So I'm asking the parent to then think about things from how it might be for their child or how it might be for the other parent. And I think it's a bit of an adaptive role play. But I ask people, shall we do it? Would they like to do it? And so far I haven't had any who've been up for it. So maybe I need to approach that in a bit of a different way. But I like the approach. I think does work well. I think Bill's absolutely right in that, just being able to imagine situations that are coming up the next week and giving people a chance to practice skills, because there's something about reading it or listening to it that's quite different from actually trying it out. And a lot of learners will come back and say, gosh, I tried that with my ex-partner and it was just hopeless. It just didn't work at all. So we've kind of become quite inventive. And I've had learners who said, you know what, I tried it when I was in the court hearing and it really made a difference. I managed my emotions. I used I was thinking of encouraging statements. I was using the Biff method when I was actually talking with the sheriff in court. And others have really used it or commented on how they've been modelling it for their children. And the children have really noticed, dad's doing something different. Mum's maybe still getting angry, but they're noticing a bit of a change. And I think I'm very firmly of the view that we can only change ourselves. Although it'd be lovely to be able to change other people, it's pretty much a non-starter in this kind of situation. So I think I've found that learners quite like the idea that they're changing themselves. They're not always particularly convinced that will work, but then as they're, maybe at the second session, they say, actually, I think I am noticing that a bit of a difference, and I'm feeling calmer, and I'm feeling that that's helping the kids, and I'm hoping it might be helping the other parent. But so I suppose, trying to adapt the skills to something that will work for the families, because I don't think any of us think of ourselves as high conflict. So often it's difficult for people to recognise themselves, and they think, well, this doesn't really apply to me. But when you're able just to say, well, let's just try the skills out and see if they make any difference to you. It's not for me to tell them they're high conflict or for me to even decide if they're high conflict or not. But I don't know that necessarily I've found anyone who thinks they're high conflict yet. Often they think their other half or their ex-other half is high conflict. But so I'm trying. I wrote a few notes just to see what might be useful for people. I think the idea of just trying something as a small change, or just trying something out, something little can have quite a big effect. And at a night, I trained with Nick Child, who I see who's here now, and I think it was either him or one of his colleagues who said to me right at the beginning of my family therapy training, if you think about throwing a tiny, tiny pebble into a pool, the ripples become huge. And that's quite a nice way to think about people trying something small differently and seeing if it might have a big impact on their family. I think I'm just trying to think about Shared Parenting Scotland and just the amount of work and support that they've put into the New Ways for Families project, for obviously primarily for parents, but also for us as coaches. And I'm guessing, and I suppose Ian will probably talk more about this, there's then thinking about how that might also involve the sheriffs, some training, and even just involving lawyers in the invitation to lawyers to suggest this online course to some of their clients, because I think as lawyers we know who's struggling, and And we also know which of our clients, court system's often not a good fit. It doesn't, bizarrely, you would imagine that you go to court and your story will be listened to. But in actual fact, the absolute opposite is the truth of it. And I think that's what informs me having the initial phone call with people, to just hear their story and just acknowledging that nobody's really listened to their story yet. Because in the court system, it's not until they get to the end of that system, that process, that there is an evidential hearing where their story can be heard. And of course, with children, often they don't get to the end. So their story is relayed to a lawyer, and then it's put into writing. And then there becomes a real fear about shifting, moving from that story at all. It becomes, I think someone wrote about it as a frozen narrative. So you can't then, it's too costly. Change your story when it's already written down in court, so people get stuck. And I think, I can't remember who said this, Ian, I think something other than court is needed just to help unstick these families and to make a difference. And I think New Ways for Family offers a good way of doing that. It's not judgmental, it works without blame, it's really child focused. It's really ticking all the boxes that we want in Scotland, that our government and our judiciary say they want, albeit they can be sometimes quite clumsy at how to achieve that. I'm not sure, Ian, if that's enough.
No. Well, let's stay in the discussion. Obviously, you can comment further. That was some very useful views. Let me pick up on one of the things that you were saying, was that say a bit more about how we're planning to develop the rollout of New Ways for Families in Scotland. We are already trying to reach both the legal profession and the judiciary, but having an evaluation with some results similar to the results that Bill mentioned from Orange County and from Canada is going to be important. So we have got Jeff Chang, who actually did the evaluation and the analysis when they were doing the work in Medicine Hat. He is working with us, and we're asking both the learners and the coaches to take part in various surveys and interviews, and Jeff will be providing us with an evaluation. We'll have some interim results, hopefully before the end of this year, and then we'll have a more complete evaluation to publish next year. We want to use this to demonstrate to everybody, but particularly to demonstrate it to the sheriffs and judges, that the course is working well in Scotland. Because, I mean, I can show them results from Medicine Hat, I can show them results from Orange County, but the question then will be, yeah, but does it work in Scotland? And so far, the feedback from the people who've been doing the learning and from the coaches has been very good. And I'm fairly optimistic that we will get a good, strong result from our evaluation in Scotland. We'll be very happy to share it with all the other countries who are doing New Ways for Families, because it's there's quite a lot of sort of networking going on between America, Canada, Australia, and Scotland, and I think you're talking to other countries too. And we will be really pushing hard on the judiciary next year, because if we can give them some positive results, we can tell them that we've tried it out, we've modified it slightly for Scotland. I know that Bill is planning to be in Scotland next May, and we will try and see if we can get you talking to judges. If not, the judiciary in Scotland have got quite a high-tech training suite where they bring in speakers from other places to address the sheriffs and judges who are being trained. And we have been talking both to the Judicial Institute and also to Lady Wise, the sort of head family judge. So our hope is that we will get a good, strong buy-in in the same way that Bill described with the various judges that he was dealing with in the North America. And we will be publicizing it very widely. We'll be using social media, various channels. we were very fortunate to get some MBA students from Edinburgh University do a project for us last week, where they did an evaluation. They worked out what our strategies could be to promote the course. They looked at pricing points, and to have a really sort of red hot group of MBA students giving us a bit of free consultancy too, which is great. That was a real boost. So we're geared up to go. We're very happy with the way that things have worked so far, and we're really going to bring it out into the open at the start of next year and try and reach a lot of families. And this will happen at the same time as a number of changes that will be, or that are already scheduled in Scotland. There is going to be a pilot of dispute resolution information sessions that will be people will have to go to before their case is heard in court. That's still being discussed, it's still being sorted out, but the law was changed in 2020 and the government is mandated or has to provide these, and that will be a really good way to reach people before they've hit the doors of the court, and hopefully to divert quite a lot of them away from the court. There's also has been a rule change within the family rules in Scottish courts, which will introduce a case management hearing at the same time as the first child welfare hearing, which is the first time that the case actually gets heard in court. Now, the rule has been implemented, but won't actually be put into use until towards the end of next year. But the idea behind that is that the court, using the case management hearing at the start, the court will be able to sort out the cases which are straightforward and just need a bit of sort of tweaking and the agreement between the parties, from the cases which are likely to be high conflict and likely to lead to a lot more time in court. And when that happens, again, we would hope that parents would be diverted to learning such as New Ways for Families to change things. And the third change, which again, we've got an awful lot of changes in Scotland that are hanging in limbo, waiting for other things to happen. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child was legislated for in Scotland a couple of years ago, but because it was not felt to be within the competence of the Scottish Parliament to do this, it's still waiting for a revised law to be passed. But the idea of that is that it will give children a lot more input, a lot more information, a lot more involvement in the process, including the process of family courts. And hopefully at the same time, it's not putting children into the deciding role, but it is bringing them far more substantially into the process. And hopefully this will be done in a way that is sensitive to the needs of children and is not going to be a traumatic or a difficult process, but it's more helping children to understand, if the court has to make a decision, why it's made a decision, and also to understand what is happening next, why they're not allowed to see one parent more than a certain amount of time, or why the court has decided to have shared parenting. All these things will hopefully be explained a bit better to them than they are at the moment. So that's just a bit of the wider context, the things that we're waiting for to happen. But we will continue to work closely with Bill and closely with our coaches to try and develop and improve the rollout in Scotland. I'm going to take advantage of being the chair to ask one question. I see there's at least one other question in the Q&A, but do post any more questions in there. My question to Bill is, you mentioned that the judges in the places where you were implementing the training were very enthusiastic. But what about the legal profession in these places? What has been the reaction of the lawyers to the training?
You know, it's mixed. In the United States, and I don't know how much in Europe, over the last 10, 12 years was the evolution of the collaborative divorce movement. And what we find is lawyers who were involved with that took right away to New Ways for Families because they could see, because it fits with their goal of helping people stay out of court and working with clients, not just working a case, but actually communicating with clients. So I'd say the biggest fans of New Ways for Families from the legal community have been lawyers involved with collaborative divorce or lawyers involved in mediation, because more and more lawyers are doing mediation because the courts are pushing more and more cases towards mediation. On the other hand, we've had lawyers who say this helps them with their clients. And one lawyer who goes to court a lot saying, I have my clients watch, we have a 1-hour introductory counseling video about New Ways for Families. And he says, I have them watch that because it's a demonstration case of the counseling method going through the court. And it shows them how they should behave, essentially. But I'd say many lawyers don't see the need for this. It's like, well, I can take care of my case and the judge will make decisions. And, you know, it's just another parenting class, which they can do after the case is done. Now, I really think you want this at the front end of the case because this may help the family stay out of court throughout and make their decisions, small and large, on their own or with the help of professionals, but not having a judge have to make the decisions for them. So so I guess there's a range of response.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a real vocal opposition. It's more, to some extent, ignoring it and trying to give it a higher profile because it doesn't compete with lawyers. It actually helps lawyers, especially the emails. So many lawyers are rewriting their clients' emails, and that's quite labor intensive, and they often get tired of that. Well, if your client goes through New Ways for Families, they'll learn how to do emails much better on their own. And a lawyer can do lawyering rather than editing.
Yes, yeah, no, and well, let me just show people the BIF book, which is the manual which people use, which is a great thing to have. We'll put details of that up on the website. Can I pass that question back to Jackie? And you'll need to unmute yourself. As a Scottish lawyer, what do you think your colleagues or your counterparts how do you think they will view the introduction of this sort of training?
I think Bill's right. I think they'll
unmute yourself. That's it.
I think I am unmuted. No,
Yeah,
can you hear me all right? Yes.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think Bill's right. And there will be a range of responses. We also have a collaborative law group in Scotland, and the idea of that is that the couple contract not to go to court. Instead, they'll work things out by a series of meetings with the lawyers. It's quite structured. Mediation is also quite commonplace in Scotland. There's something about lawyers wanting to do what they do, which is not get involved on a Friday afternoon about a parent who can't turn up tomorrow but doesn't communicate with the other parent. That is not what lawyers should be doing. Lawyers don't get paid to do that stuff on legal aid, but it's a huge part of what we end up doing, which is communicating for people. I'm with Bill in that this training, mediation, whatever it should be at the front end. I know that in England there is mandatory mediation, but that it could be better. I think it's only one session, possibly two of 1 hour, and that's just not enough. I see this based on what mediators were saying at a recent webinar, in that there are so many forms to fill in and things to do. It's quite administrative, and then the actual time for mediation is so short as not to be useful. I hope in Scotland we would, if we were going to have anything mandatory, we would really give quite careful consideration to that. The only other thing I would say that occurred to me when Bill was speaking, and I think one of my clients who's doing the New Ways for Families course was concerned because the other parent was almost using that as a delaying tactic. The same can be said of mediation, in that she wasn't really committed to it, but had agreed to do it, but the time for doing it was being very stretched. I think it had been, I can't remember how many months, and the first coaching session hadn't happened yet. So, you know, the practicalities of it, I think, should be quite carefully addressed so that we're not all swept away by the romanticism of it, because of course it's a good idea, of course it's better than court, but there are a lot of parents who, for example, are not agreeable to contact because of adult reasons rather than child-focused reasons, might be the best way to put it. And so you can understand why people, you know, we delay things or defer things. And I think, as ever, there's a mixture. I'm slightly troubled that our judiciary will be able to recognise at the very first child welfare hearing whether or not it's a high conflict case, but that is...
Yes. No. Well, we will see how that develops as it goes on, and there are definitely difficulties in that as well as opportunities. Yeah, no. Well, and mediation certainly is being pushed strongly in England and Wales at the moment. We also heard from a speaker last week about parenting coordination, which is appearing in very small amounts in England, and I think there's some interest in Scotland, but obviously it's more of something that's been established in North America and in South Africa, I think. Parenting coordination is about trying to, once the decision has been made or once the order has been made, it's somebody who's going to sit in the middle and actually work with the parents to help them carry it out. Anyway, we have a question from Nick Child. If you could bring Nick Child into the meeting, Fraser, and he is someone who's been obviously looking into this area quite a lot and has got some very interesting ideas himself. So, Nick, do you want to ask your questions and sort of discuss that with Bill and Jackie?
Thank you, Ian. Just my question is kind of a niggly one. So first, I just want to say how much I admire Bill and, in fact, all three of you, without going into hours of gushing feedback about it. It's just astonishing to see people who've devoted their lives and their time and their energy to individual superhuman efforts in the face of an extremely challenging system, and all three of you have done stuff that I just quail at the idea. So I've kind of moved away from the front line of campaigning, of helping families, and of dealing with the system as it is, which all three of you are rising to the challenge of trying to do something useful with the system as it is. And I've personally learned a lot from things like Biff, and I admire the way all three of you, in a sense, have avoided the common traps of using inflammatory language. You know, quite specifically, Bill is innovatively inventing ways to not inflame people further than they already are, which they usually often are with separation. So the point I wanted to make was a sort of general one, and then a specific one that's more constructive, is that you're dealing with a system which is a huge river flowing downstream, which is based on a hugely historically, culturally accepted view that separation should go to family lawyers as a first port of call. And yet I've been reading recently, 100 years ago, ignored advice by somebody in England in the laws 100 years ago was that family issues to do with children cannot be dealt with successfully in an adversarial courtroom. And so, you know, I can see why, given the immovable system you're dealing with, the solution has to be to train the clients of that system to manage it better than the system otherwise induces them to do. So it's just a comment on how the general culture of the legal system as the go-to one for decades can take some of the blame for breeding the high conflict that typically is attributed to families. Even judges will say, even Sir Andrew McFarlane will say the family courts are a bad system, but it's parents who've got to be responsible for their distress and their management. So I find it very frustrating when Ian and others kind of make it the parents' business to have to behave themselves. However, I see the point of it, and I can see that people who are disturbed and do have personality problems come there. So all of that's a kind of background to try and put it in a simple, useful way. I wondered if Bill and Jackie, it helps when you can sort of put to high conflict, upset parents that perhaps this historical system can take at least some of the blame for creating high conflict, and whether that helps them to feel less blamed as you try to help them be the ones who cope with blindly high conflict inducing systems like adversarial law. I hope that's clear.
Yeah. No, I would say that, yes, the structure of the court process emphasizes opposition and exaggeration. And so relationships require cooperation and reality. And so in court, to win, since that's the goal, court is a win-lose structure. And you're right, judges really try to overcome this, but the structure of it is, if you're not good at winning, you're probably going to lose. And the structure of court is a long preparation period and then a short decision-making period. And so during the preparation, people are in a win-lose mindset. And one of the worst things is this spills over to the kids. And so while each parent is kind of gearing up to win, because otherwise their fear they'll lose, to win time especially, they're preparing papers, and the kid's like, "Oh, what are you doing, Dad?" "Oh, just getting ready for court. You know, your mother doesn't want to share you with me." Or, "What are you working on, Mom?" "Oh, I'm getting ready for court. You know, your father's being really inappropriate, and I want the judge to know that." Well, the kids absorb this. And so they absorb the adversarial thinking, and the emotions are heightened. So parents have less emotional energy for their kids too in this kind of long preparation stage. Then at court, things happen, they happen fast, they don't necessarily make sense. It's a complicated process, all of that. And their lawyers, if they have lawyers, their lawyers understand the process, but there may not be time to explain it. And so it's really a frightening thing, and it gets passed down to the kids, and it heightens anxiety. So having a cooperative process that builds on relationship skills, because if you think about it, court is oppositional skills, and out of court, mediation, collaborative divorce, etc., are cooperative skills, are relationship skills, strengthen relationships. And that's what we want to teach with New Ways for Families. So if they get these relationship skills working successfully enough, they're not going to have to go into these oppositional litigation skills. So I think you're right, but I think it's important to separate the structure from the individual professionals. So for example, judges really do try hard to overcome that. They try to, and I know they do this because as a family lawyer in court for 15 years, the judges try to give both sides something and try to neutralize the conflict to some extent. But that doesn't necessarily make good decisions. I've had a case I think of where the judge gave mom what she wanted financially and dad what he wanted in terms of a 50-50 parenting schedule. Well, neither of the parents was happy with it because they felt that they lost in the other person's gain. And that's how court often works. It's a zero sum. So anyway, judges try to overcome it, but the structure is built in that way. And that's sad. So you're right to think that's a concern.
Yeah. Jackie, what would be your take on that?
As a lawyer, I became a family therapist because I didn't think the court system was right for all families. As a therapist, I think the two systems are sometimes necessary and can work well together. So we don't see the families who are reasonable and who communicate and who cooperate and who have the best interests of their kids at heart. And the very nature of family law means that there is a problem before people come to speak with them. There are difficulties when you have a family lawyer who has a belief in court not being the only way forward for one parent, and maybe a lawyer who has done mainly crime and needs money to pay his staff at the end of the day for the other parent. There is a problem when you have a sheriff who used to be a fiscal and has been elevated to the bench. You have in Glasgow family law sheriffs who have an experience, who hold a case, who give some continuity, who hear people, who refer to mediation, who involve therapists. In other places, you don't. So it's really complicated, and it really should be what is best for this family, for these children. But our justice system has been around for a long time, and we have the rule of law in our country, and I wouldn't want that to change. And we also have some parents who, because of hurt by the other parent, because of the adult stuff that's happened in their relationship, because of fear of losing their children to a dad who might be more fun with his new girlfriend, all sorts of human reasons, just cannot allow contact, cannot put their kids first. And obviously, because of what I do, I think therapy is a much more effective way of working with that family. But because of the circumstances of the one parent who prefers status quo, sometimes you need a compulsion. You need a sheriff to say, I want you to go to mediation, I want you to go to therapy, and then I want you to come back, or I want to hear in 8 weeks how things are for your child. So there isn't a simple, easy answer. Of course, in family law, the judicial system doesn't work. There isn't one truth to be established by a sheriff hearing evidence. That's an absurd concept. But a lot of sheriffs agree that that's an absurd concept. So do a lot of lawyers. But it takes all sorts. Sorry, that's a rubbish answer, but that's
no. That's and I would go along with these views. Some of the people who come to us think that the whole system is rotten. All the lawyers are crooks who are in it for the money. All the judges are corrupt, and we should blow them all up and start again. And I don't go along with that. I've seen in my time in acting in court, I've seen some very good sheriffs who have really understood what's gone on and who have penetrated beyond the statements that were made. I've also seen some very poor sheriffing and some sheriffs who are so reluctant to take decisions that the case just went on and on and on and on. And we hear this. We hear of people who've seen 5 or 6 different sheriffs who've had dozens of hearings, who've spent, if they're paying for it, large sums of money. These are not good. And we hear of examples elsewhere of the judge in Germany who made sure that the cases were stated to him on two sides of a sheet of paper within a week or 2 weeks. He would consider it in court and he would have another hearing in another 2 weeks because he wanted to get at the whole thing fast, and he didn't want to be flooded with paper and have things take months to reach any sort of decision. So we would love to see changes in the court, but I agree with Jackie. I think we do need the compulsion of court, but probably in far fewer cases. And that's a very strong argument to make to the politicians, because obviously they're very worried at the moment about the cost of running the court system. So if we can suggest to them that you could maybe take a third or even a half of cases out of court, that's a very attractive case to make to them. But it is difficult, and we're Nick mentioned this sort of river of things that are flowing down, and Jackie mentioned throwing the pebble in. And at the moment we're throwing pebbles in, and the pebbles are making an impact, but they are still just pebbles. So we need to keep throwing things into the water to make more of an impact.
Ian, if I could add something
sure.
on this.
Sure.
So the idea that to be removed from court a certain amount of cases, and I agree with Jackie and Ian both, that we need the court system, but how much to use it. I think our experience has been, if we can keep 80% of the cases that are really going to court today out of the court by teaching skills so they can manage and learn and proceed out of court, I think the courts could be able to spend much more time really managing that 20% better, because time is such a factor with court. But the other thing I wanted to say is we find that having the court order people to take new ways for families really gets, say, the more high conflict parent engaged in learning skills that they would not do voluntarily. And so with it on a voluntary system, we get a lot of people, but by the court ordering, some of the cases that seem most difficult do become manageable. So with the court in structuring people learning skills is a really helpful thing. Yeah.
Nick, you wanted to comment on that?
Well, thank you for the responses, and you're responding as you'd expect as people who are dealing with the present system as it is, and there's no question that you're doing amazing things given that. But to use the river analogy, it takes a few decades, but it is possible to change the direction of the river. And if we can change the direction of the river, then it wouldn't be such a superhuman effort for hundreds and thousands of activists like yourselves and parents and campaigners. If we could change the direction of the river, then you will be flowing down the river in the direction you want to go, rather than swimming desperately up the river in the direction you wish you didn't have to go. Yeah.
Well, to extend that analogy even further, I feel there's a gale brewing up outside my window at the moment. So, any charity should be trying to reduce the need for its existence rather than to persist. And I think a charity has got to think seriously about that. We're not here to keep the helpline going just because it's a good helpline. We're here to help people to move into shared parenting and to get the benefits themselves. I don't see that we're going to do ourselves out of a job, but I think we could certainly help to turn the tide, as Nick suggests. Good. Okay. Well, unless there are any other questions being posted, I think I'm going to draw us to a conclusion now. I want to thank Bill and Jackie very much for the very useful thoughts they put together here. And we will use this material. It's not just a case of having a one-off webinar and then nobody hears about it. We will try and promote this stuff and make sure that lots of other people do hear this. It's been a very interesting discussion, a good continuation of our series. We'll email people, let them know when the slides and the film and the transcripts are available. Many thanks to Bill and Jackie, to Harper Macleod for supporting the series. Thanks to Fraser, who's done the technical side of things. The next talk in this series, we don't have a date for it yet. We have got Judge Marcus, or rather retired Judge Marcus from Israel, who will be talking about the changes they've made to the family court there, and that quite significant changes made over the last 20 or 30 years. So it'd be interesting to hear from Philip Marcus how these are working. And we're also pleased to say that we have got Lady Wise, who is the head family judge in Scotland, has agreed to provide a response to Judge Marcus. The difficulty then is that Lady Wise's diary is quite busy, and therefore we're still waiting to get a date that we can get both these people together. But that will be one of the coming events. The other one that we've definitely signed up is Professor Jose Manuel de Torres Perea, who will tell us about what's happening in Spain, where shared parenting seems to be taking off quite spectacularly, and that although it's and it seems to be the judiciary in Spain who are making shared parenting orders. Whether or not there's a law there to tell them to do that, they are deciding themselves. So Jose will give us some more insight from Spain about why this is happening. Probably not until next year we'll run that webinar. But anyway, thank you very much for everybody for taking part. We will hope to see people again at future webinars and stay in touch. And thank you very much to Bill. Cheers.